Salvete omnes, amici et amicae, ec exaverius, Wester, ex Viva Voce Classics. This is Javier from Viva Voce. Again, welcome again to this, your online learning community for Latin students and people who are interested in Latin from an active approach, from an immersive approach. Today I bring to you a new resource. It's not brand new, but it's recent in terms of it's been published last year. It's a textbook. An Orberg style textbook. Its name is Via Latina, and I'm going to discuss with you about this gem now on this video. Even if you are somebody who's working through Orberg, I strongly recommend that you stay until the end of the video, because I'm going to discuss some features of this textbook that you can use along Lingua Latina per se Illustrata, or even on the side or just by itself, that I think you're going to find very helpful for your studies of Latin. So welcome everybody, and let's get straight into the video and discuss this new Latin learning resource. Okay, so let's get straight into Via Latina. So what exactly is Via Latina? Well, it's a textbook basically. You have a screenshot in front of you that it's following. It's basically tailored after Lingua Latina per se Illustrata in many regards. It's a textbook that utilizes also the same inductive contextualized method of learning, so to say, in the sense that you are supposed to progress through the context, through the text, through the grammar, the vocabulary, by means of the context itself and the text itself. And that's a part of the beauty of these methods, right? You can see already there are beautiful notes. The pictures, I must say, in these textbooks are very, very much looked after, which is something always helpful. I forgot to say that it's been published by Cultura Clásica Press here in Spain. I'll leave the link to the Amazon book where you can purchase in case you are interested after watching this video. I make no money out of this, just so you know. All of the resources that I display on this channel are just because I find they are helpful for learners of Latin, especially for beginners and intermediate students of Latin. But yes, like I was saying, it's pretty much tailored after Lingua Latina. In that sense that many of you are already familiar with Orberg, Lingua Latina per se Illustrata, right? There's no much need for introduction. But for those who are not so familiar with it, it's a way. Well, Orberg basically tried to put forward a different kind of a system of learning, or a different methodology of learning that was already implemented in other language courses, but that was very different to what traditionally was done in the case of Latin, which was grammar translation, as you probably all know and are aware about. So in this kind of textbooks, you are supposed to progress to the language, progress to both the vocabulary and the grammar by means of the text itself. And the annotations, the explanations that are done on the margin of the pages and through the pictures, as you can see here. Ecce larentia femina est, and already in the margin of the page we have a picture of what a femina means. Now that's where the beauty of it lies, in the sense that it's a wonderful material for those of you who are self-learners or autodidact students of Latin. It's something that you can use in your studies without the need, in principle, of a teacher. Of course, a teacher is going to cut a lot of the time, and there are many situations in which you can get stuck in the book, and it's always helpful to count on somebody who can, make difficult things more evident to you. But it's very good in the sense that the text itself is built in such a way that you are supposed to get through it without the need of any external explanations, right? Now, some of you might be thinking, we already have Lingua Latina per se Illustrata, so why would we need any other kind of resources or materials to complement it? And because I pretty much feel this is a textbook that you can use, and maybe on the side of Lingua Latina just by itself as well, but it's certainly very, very much similar to it. So I think I'm going to focus on four characteristics of Via Latina that make it very helpful for your studies of Latin, for those of you who are initiating yourselves in the study of Latin. Right, the first one is, if it's a reading method, why do we need another reading method, one must think? Okay, because there's never enough reading material, guys. When you're starting to learn a language, the way your brain acquire the content of that language is through exposure, mostly. We never get enough material, especially enough beginners material or intermediate students material, or just, you know, simple Latin. Even for people who are already advanced in the study, sometimes you do need to spend sometimes working on things you've worked with before. And the problem we have as classicists or as teachers of or learners of classical languages is that all the materials we have, you know, it's not like ancient people bothered themselves to publish any kind of, for the most part, textbooks for beginners of Latin. They already spoke Latin. It wasn't a problem for them. We have to create those sources of learn that are going to be helpful for our learning, right? So in that sense, Via Latina fits in pretty well, because it provides extra reading material for you if you find yourself in a situation where you already have dealt with Lingua Latina, even maybe you have done some reading on, you know, Fabula Suirae, some of the other chunks. Well, it's some more extra reading material. I'm going to just, as I was preparing the video, I remember the situation I had with one student of mine who almost knew off by heart Lingua Latina per se Illustrata. He'd gone so many times through it that in our lessons sometimes it was difficult for me to tell how much he was how much he had processed by meaning, how much he could understand and take out of the context of the book itself, and how much was just pure, memorization and knowledge that he had because he'd done it so many times that he knew it off by heart. So that, in that sense, being able to access some extra source, some extra materials, is also a very helpful way to reinforce the contents that you're already working on. Mami, estoy grabando. Que estoy grabando. Sí, estoy grabando. Pues espera un momentito, porfa, ya me tenía que cortar. Bueno, ya pasa, ya da igual. So when it comes to reading, quality is important, of course, but I would say, especially if you're a beginner intermediate student, prioritize quantity over quality. There'll be enough time to read Caesar's Catilinarians or whatever, but you want to make sure that you have hours of reading under your belt before you access those more difficult texts. Okay, the second reason is because you always need extra ways to access those contents. Whether it might be the grammar or whether it might be the vocabulary. There's also some variance in vocabulary between these books and Lingua Latina, of course, because it's a different textbook. But what I was trying to say is having alternate ways of accessing a particular structure, a particular word, is one thing that helps our memorization. It basically improves the memorization process if you have more than one route. So if you learned, it happens a lot with students of Lingua Latina, that they have to remember one case, or they have to remember one word, and then they don't remember it, but then maybe you've quote a passage from Lingua Latina and they straight away go like, oh yes, I remember now, because I've read the passage. My brain has already accessed that learning before. It's just that I have to. Remember those words and those grammar items, our memory will work a lot better in remembering them when we find them in a text, for instance. And that's where more reading material can be of great help. Also, it's not exactly the same vocabulary in Lingua Latina, and one of the things that I quite like is the focus that this textbook places on Roman culture and Roman myths or history, foundational history, such as, if you see even from the title, the index page, for those of you who are teachers of Latin or who are familiar already with other more advanced Latin passages, many of these will become natural to you. Ecce Larentia, Larentia, Acca Larentia, right? That mother of Romulus and Remus, the stepmother of Romulus and Remus, or the adopted mother, right? Then Romulus and Remus themselves, Roma, Reges Latini, so the history of the 7 kings of Rome is followed through this textbook. I think that's very useful for learners of Latin in general, because you really want to get acquainted with the foundational myths or foundational legends of the history of Rome, not so much only because of their historical relevance or whatever, but especially for their literary relevance. You're gonna find those myths in Virgil, you're gonna find them in Livy, and even for those of you who think there might be people interested in reading medieval Latin or ecclesiastical Latin, well, the Latin Church Fathers, many of them were, Latin. They belonged to the Roman Empire, they belonged to that, they were heirs to that cultural heritage. So if you read somebody like Augustine, Jerome, they're still within that tradition, and they're going to quote passages. I've read some of them. I'm working with an author currently, his name is Prudentius, he's a poet from the 4th century AD. And it's important to have some background knowledge of the history of Rome, even if you're going to read Latin authors who are not strictly speaking classical. So in that sense, the book works really well in introducing you to as kind of the center bone to the textbook. You can see the history of Rome all the way through the passages, all the way through the capitula, right? And then the last thing I did want to say about the textbook has to do with the exercises. We can never get enough exercising when it comes to learning a language, right? And one thing I've noticed about the textbook when it comes to the exercises, I see, I've just displayed a little part because of copyright reasons, but you will see that there are many different sort of pictures that relate, like I was saying before, to the history of Rome and to the mythology of Rome, and they're very well looked after. And even I would say, for somebody who's done a bit of archaeology, the representations of many of the everyday life items that they are displaying on the textbook is very Roman. I mean, it's very, very useful even for those of you who are teachers, for example. You could use many of these pictures to explain the parts of the house, the Roman circus, the weaponry of a legionary, all that kind of things are very well looked after in this textbook. But I was coming to the last point, which had to do with the exercises. Now, some of the exercises you're going to find here are still Orberg style, in that traditional form of you're given the word, or you're given a sentence, and then you have to fill in the gap with the ending or the word that is missing. But there's been some improvement on. Orberg is quite old already for when it comes to methodology and teaching investigation. Some of the things they used have been improved since then. And this textbook makes a good reflection on that. Like, you have several exercises that are more based on your competence rather than on your knowledge, or just on working with chunks of text. They focus more on your comprehension of the text. For instance, this kind of exercise, quid non convenit, so what is not fitting in here, right? And then you have to select from the list of words which one you feel is not appropriate. And that makes you, of course, you have to use your knowledge of the language in order to make that decision, right? So we have eorum, which is a genitive plural. We have eius, it's a genitive singular. You have eo, it's an ablative singular. You have feminarum, and then you have virorum. If you're already working with the case system, you probably are very able, you're going to easily spot on the weird one out, right, which is eo in the ablative case, because the rest of them are in the genitive case. So that kind of thing is very helpful in that it provides a different style of exercising to what we used in Lingua Latina. Lingua Latina can be quite repetitive when it comes to the exercises in my experience. You have true and false exercises. You also have definitions. That's something that I was very pleased to see. So you're given words in the margin of the page, and then you have to provide definitions for those words. well, that's very, very helpful, I think, in terms of making you think of not just the word, but how would you explain the meaning of that word in Latin. Paraphrasing is really important for the purpose of learning any language, I think. So yes, that's about this textbook, Via Latina. I'm going to show you now in full. So I hope you guys found this helpful, this link, Via Latina. So I hope you guys found this new resource, this new textbook, Via Latina, of help to you. I'm going to leave a link to the Amazon website page where you can purchase it on my description below. Also, please, if you liked what you saw on the video, give me a thumbs up and also subscribe to this channel. And finally, for those of you who are interested in learning Latin and are beginner students and want to know more about resources, spoken Latin, and how active Latin can help you in general to improve your command of the language, you can join my Telegram community, which I use to share all my news, all my posts on social media, and all the new opportunities for learners that I have, courses that I offer, lessons, etc. So I'll leave the link to that Telegram community as well down in the description. And that was all from me today. Valete bene et videbimus in proxima kinematografia. Valete omnes.